Hello, dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen. This is EBC World English News with me, Shfar Haulako. And do stay with us as I go through our selected brief updates for the hour. But first, the top stories. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed receives General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. And President Biden expresses confidence in the possibility of reaching a resolution for the hostage situation. Now, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed today welcomed General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council of the Republic of the Sudan, at the Bole International Airport. The two sides later exchanged views on current issues of mutual interest at the office of the Prime Minister. Today, I have welcomed to Ethiopia General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, President of the Transitional Sovereignty Council of the Republic of the Sudan, for discussions on key current issues, the Prime Minister said. A high-level delegation of Ethiopian regional states presidents led by Adam Farah, the vice president of the Prosperity Party, paid a visit to the Dujiangyan irrigation scheme in China, one of the world's wonders of irrigation engineering. The irrigation system, which is like killing three birds with one stone, is flood-controlled irrigation water source for Chengdu Plain and a tourist destination site, the Ethiopian embassy in Beijing said. Chinese officials briefed the delegation that the irrigation system represents the ancient Chinese wisdom and engineering capability. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, will help Ethiopia in galvanizing support to achieve its pledges, Deputy High Commissioner Kelly Clements reaffirmed. The Deputy High Commissioner reiterated the UN Refugee Agency's continued support to Ethiopia in her discussion with Sagab Kababo, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Permanent Representative of Ethiopia to the UN office in Geneva and other international organizations in Switzerland. At the meeting, Ambassador Sagab briefed the Deputy High Commissioner about Ethiopia's preparation for the Global Refugee Forum, GRF 2023. He highlighted Ethiopia's pledges and commitments to be made at the forum. For her part, the Deputy High Commissioner highlighted about her recent trip to Ethiopia and appreciated Ethiopia's generosity in hosting refugees and its leadership role since GRF 2019.
Garden. Should be a bunch of plants that are native to Ethiopia. This is the crown of Taitu, who was Menelik's queen, Nigasiti Taitu. And she did a lot. She actually started the school systems in Ethiopia.
And now let's turn our attention to stories selected for detailed analysis. As the nation continues to grapple with security issues, some politicians urge the government to be more accommodative in its approach to find remedial peace. Talking to ETV, members of the 547-seat parliament underscored that the government must open all avenues of peace and dialogue, even with those who have resorted to the barrel of the gun. Our staff reporter, Abdamo Ashagri, has talked to the MPs and compiled the following report.
Addressing the third year fourth regular session of the House of People's Representatives, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed urged Ethiopians to embrace peace, harmony and forgiveness, calling this a key to realize a prosperous Ethiopia. The ruling Prosperity Party is working hard to build an inclusive democracy, taking into the diverse identities of nations and nationalities of the country. The Prime Minister pledging to realize a prosperous country where every citizen lives with equality and freedom, Abiy underscored.
Ready to
Talking to BBC English, some members of parliament urged the government to open up a avenue of dialogue even with rebel forces fighting it from the bush.
He highlighted the need for peace and the stability of the nation in order to promote development in the country. And he made it clear that the government is committed towards peaceful solutions of all conflicts, of all differences, that the government is ready to go to the negotiating table with anyone who is interested in it.
It is to be recalled that Abiy told MEPs Ethiopia's lack of direct access to the sea has contributed the increase of undocumented Ethiopian migrants to various Middle East and African countries. He used the occasion to call on horn countries to understand quest to the sea access with a good intention. Regarding on the bread and butter issue of port access, the MEPs underlined that the Premier is magnanimous in adopting a win-win approach with neighboring countries.
It was really concentrated on the geopolitics, mostly on the port issue. The Ethiopian population is becoming more than, it's around 120 million population. It should not be trade for the neighboring countries. Rather, it should be area of collaboration in terms of trade, economy, health, education, in every sector. We can collaborate and live together.
If there is an economic growth, there is also a growth of import and export level of the country. And for that, you need a port. And port is actually in the interest of this growth. As you know, Ethiopia is only one of the few countries with a population of 20 million and landlocked. This is unacceptable because the need for a port is imminent, is basic. Because the export of the country grows. It's dynamic, as you know very well. The Prime Minister, in the meantime, also highlighted the fact that Ethiopia is in need of getting port through give and take. It's not through force, it's not through violence, it's not through declaring any war. It's through give and take.
During his parliamentary address, the Premier called upon all army groups to lay down their arms and join the bandwagon of peaceful struggle in their pursuit of the national question.
Moving to continental news, Ghana has called for a united African front on slavery reparations. The Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo has called for a united front with African leaders on demands for reparations for transatlantic slavery and colonial era damage. The Ghanaian leader has been vocal in calling for reparations and used his speech to the UN General Assembly this year to demand more acknowledgement of the impact of colonial exploitation. Tigisternis has the following story from Africa News.
Some Western leaders have recently moved to acknowledge the wrongs of colonial era in Africa, and museums have begun returning stolen African treasures and artifacts. But the concept of financial repatriation over a trade that shipped millions as slaves from West and Central Africa remains fake.
No amount of money can restore the damage caused by the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences, which will span many centuries. But surely, this is a matter that the world must confront and can no longer ignore.
Ghana's leader has been vocal in calling for repatriations and used his speech on the UN General Assembly this year to demand more acknowledgement of the impact of colonial exploitation. He added that even before these discussions on preparations concluded, the entire continent of Africa deserves a formal apology from the European nations involved in the slave trade.
Before these discussions on reparations conclude, the entire continent of Africa deserves a formal apology from the European nations involved in the slave trade. The effects of the slave trade have been devastating to the continent and to the African diaspora. The entire period of slavery meant that our progress, economically, culturally, and psychologically.
Akufo-Addo called on Africa to work together with the Caribbean to advance repatriations, labeling it a valid demand for justice. Describing slavery and colonialism as Africa's dark phase, President of the Comoros and the African Union chairperson, Azali Assoumani, said the impact still wreaks havoc in our population. Germany's President Frank-Walter this month expressed his shame at crimes committed during his country's colonial rule in Tanzania. Earlier this year, the owner of British newspaper The Guardian apologized for the role of its founders in transatlantic slavery and announced a decade-long program of restorative justice following an independent probe. While the debate over repatriations for slavery is still developing, the restoration of stolen treasures and artifacts has steadily advanced. Nigeria, in the process of bringing back thousands of 16th and 18th century metal plaque, sculpture, and objects that were looted from the ancient kingdom of Benin and found their way into museums and art collectors across the US and Europe. Many of the artifacts were originally taken in 1897 when a British military expedition attacked and destroyed Benin City.
And finally, the U.S. President Joe Biden spoke with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where they discussed efforts to release the hostages held by Hamas. On Tuesday, Hamas offered to release up to 70 Israeli women and children in return for a 5-day ceasefire. Biden is upbeat about the possibility of a truce between the warring parties, albeit on a temporary basis. Gushumalisa Osmoronat from TRT World.
The World Health Organization says there may be more than 1,300 Israeli attacks on medical facilities alone, but Israel says there will be no let-up in its military campaign until the hostages being held by Hamas are released, which makes indications of a possible breakthrough particularly welcome. Under a tentative agreement reached in Qatar, up to 70 women and children could be released by Hamas in exchange for Palestinian women and young people being held in Israeli jails. The U.S. president was asked if he could give the hostages a message of hope.
Yes, I can. I've been talking with the people involved every single day. I believe it's going to happen, but I don't want to get into detail.
What's your message for the families?
Hang in there, we're coming.
In Lebanon, however, senior Hamas officials were quick to cast out on a possible hostage release deal.
We want your children to return to you, but the one who is obstructing that is Netanyahu, a three-headed war and aggression government. He is prolonging the war for personal reasons and does not care about your children or his soldiers in the field.
As sparring over the hostage situation continued, tens of thousands of people were descending on Washington for a rally in support of Israel. Nearby a counter-demonstration, Americans condemned the Israeli attack on Gaza and called for an immediate ceasefire. The conflict continues to inflame opinion here and around the world.
Well, dear viewers, with that we come to the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching us. Bye-bye.